okay, this is it. We're starting. We're going to do Balance of Power, which is Series 1, Show 3. I'm Rob Grant, co-creator and writer of it. And I'm with Sir Edward Dubai, our wonderful producer and director, and you know, he's a top director, movies and everything. But we were asking him before what he'd done before he actually directed Red Dwarf, and he'd only done one show. So he was pretty. He was Girls on Top.
Very big. It was a very big and difficult show.
I understand though that you had difficulty with the cast on it, Ed, on Girls on Top.
There was one member of the cast who kind of didn't think I was good enough, and she was probably right. So I had to ask my producer, how do you deal with that? And he said, well, the best thing to do is to ingratiate yourself with the actor and just become as friendly as you can be, and then it'll all sort itself out. So that's exactly what I did, except I slightly overcooked it and we got married.
Because it was Ruby Wax who tried to get him fired off the show, wrote to Alan McEwen, the guy who owned it, and said, I cannot work with this man, he's never shot a comedy before.
I'm afraid that's all true.
And we've also got Paul Jackson, the godfather of alternative comedy, and without whom there would be no Red Dwarf, really. He got it on, he got it made sneakily. We have to say, we'll probably.
It was the one time in my life, right? It honestly was the one time in my life that I had what in America they call a put. I had a slot of 6.5 hours that I could put anything I wanted into. And I desperately looked around and you were the only buggers I could find.
That's how we get on. And so, okay, today we're doing Balance of Power, which was it was the third show we'd started writing. We had Body Snatchers as number 2, and we abandoned it. And I think when we actually wrote this one, we hadn't yet cast it. The casting went on for absolutely ever. We may have just cast Craig and Chris. It was the beginning of the whole thing, and we had been warned not to get too science fiction-y, at least at the beginning. I mean, we assumed it would be forever, but so it's a much more regular sitcom kind of show. It's like a stage show, really. You know, there's no racing around with bazookoids or aliens, or well, there's no aliens ever anyway. But there's no things that we pretended weren't aliens, so it's an unusual show, and I was kind of dreading watching it, really, because I haven't seen it in like 30 years. But I found it very interesting. But we'll go over it. So we have a warning that if you've downloaded this from Amazon, there aren't any subtitles on it for mysterious reasons. So you might want to listen with an earbud in one ear. I should probably give you a few minutes to.
While they're doing that, Rob, while they're finding their earplugs, Alan Ronald's asking, can anybody explain what a red dwarf actually is?
A red dwarf is a star that never quite makes it into the sort of sun spectrum. It never gets hot or bright enough. And we liked it for 2 reasons. One, because it was our initials, R&D, and the other one was because it survived longer than all the other stars because it wasn't trying too hard. And we thought it was a good omen for the show, so that's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Rob, how do I get to see people's comments?
You tick the chat, the Q&A button.
Chat. Got it. Thank you. Great.
No, you don't see the chat there, Rob.
Also click the chat button. I mean, for God's sake.
Ah, there we go. I'm sorry.
I knew that. I was just trying to cover for Paul.
So I'm on DVD, so I've got subtitles, but unfortunately, it's just stopped itself. So I've got to go in all over again.
Okay, I'm lining it up. We're going from the very top. If you've got some sort of logo at the beginning, go past that to just the flat of the spaceship before the brush comes into shot. We try and sync it up by pressing play simultaneously.
Don't worry if you get behind, even a minute behind, it's not that important.
Because you'll see what we're talking about after we've talked about it. Should be correct. Okay, so favourite gag from this episode from Charles Ross. We'll tell you as we go, really.
There's two crackers in this. I love it.
Yeah, there's a couple of really...
Actually, Rob, if we're asking for favourite moments, because it's probably too long to talk about when we get to it, but there's for me, there's the absolute kernel of probably the first 4 series, that the heart of the comic mechanism that makes Red Dwarf work is in this episode. And it's a conversation between Holly and Lister, where Dave says, why him? Of all the people you could have brought back, why him? And Holly says, because he's the one who'll keep you sane. And I've always loved that knowledge on your part, on the writer's part, of what was going on here, because you always tease me that I always told you a sci-fi sitcom would never work. And the reason I loved Red Dwarf from the first time I ever read it was because it wasn't a sci-fi sitcom. And I know you made it much more sci-fi later on, and quite right too. But essentially, the comic mechanism that drives it is The Odd Couple, or Steptoe & Son, or sometimes you see it in Porridge, one of my favorite episodes of Bottom, the 2 boys stuck on the top of the Ferris wheel. It's that thing of the Jean-Paul Sartre, which you also mentioned in this episode, we clothe hell is other people. And it's been stuck in a confined space where you can't get out. And you have to go on. You have to rely on each other. And Holly says that in just these 2 lines of dialogue. And for me, that's why Red Dwarf is what it is. At its very core, there's an odd couple comedy of the highest quality. And historians, if you like, of comedy history, if you don't know it, look at the first ever episode of Steptoe & Son. Episode called The Offer. Rob and I were lucky enough to have lunch with Ray and Alan way back, and we did a radio show with them. They were great guys, and they were really the godfathers of British comedy. And they wrote this episode of Steptoe, and it absolutely, in half an hour, you see these 2 people who are completely antithetical to each other, but who cannot get away from each other. And the last scene almost makes you cry when Harold tries to walk out and he can't. So, it's a treat. It's called The Offer. And if you haven't seen it, have a look. It's a real treat.
Well, we got a question actually last week about Galton and Simpson, because I mentioned Hancock. And Paul did very kindly take us out for lunch with them. And it was about the 3rd or 4th time I'd met them. But I finally plucked up the courage to ask them the question I thought every writer would want to ask them, which was, when you finish typing run credits on The Blood Donor, did you know you had a classic on your hands? And Alan said, I typed the last letter, picked it up, shuffled the script together, slammed it on the table and said, pick the bones out of that. Ain't you? So,
okay, sorry to hold you up, guys, but I just think the kernel is right here in this episode.
have you got the questions, guys, as well?
I can switch to them.
Yeah, they're asking about Manchester. We'll talk about Manchester as we go, because it's kind of this. We were settling in Manchester at this point. So, ready to play. We're all lined up. Yeah.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, play.
Got the brush. Pulling out. These opening
titles. We talked last week about the SIG tube.
All I want to do is just give special credit to Peter Ragg, who built the spaceship, shot the spaceships, worked off of the designs that me and Rob and Doug had worked out in hours and hours and hours in the pub. And then he actually shot this as well. And he built all of it. And it's not just this. Basically, Peter Ragg was the linchpin for all the effects throughout the...
Invented the Scatter's Head, didn't he?
Yeah, until this whole first series. Well,
all the talking machines. Although, to be fair, Ed, these shots we're seeing now, these are remastered and subsequently added in, aren't they? Am I right?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Somebody asked about the asteroid on the side, and that was a deliberate thing. We actually told Pete to put an asteroid there that had hit them, and they decided just to carry on mining it. So that was the kind of, it was different for a spaceship to be, you know.
I can't hear it.
Yeah, this top, which we laboured and laboured over, we thought it's such a complicated setup. You know, how do you get it over quickly? And we didn't really need it, I suppose, but yeah, we dropped it after Series 1, didn't we?
Yeah, because by then people knew. But you're right. If you're coming to this as your third episode, I mean, you've got no idea what's going on. Yeah.
That joke still works.
It's a good guy.
I love this. This is, again, we talked last week about these two guys, their first big acting roles. This is a bloody difficult learn. I mean, this is just reiterating. And in fact, if you listen carefully or watch the subtitles, Lister gets it wrong when he repeats it, which I think he does just to show how dismissive he is of the whole thing, but he doesn't actually use the correct number.
We were talking about this, weren't we? Because Craig had he kind of had an eidetic memory for scripts.
Yeah.
He'd look at them once and remember everybody's lines. So it's very, very unlikely you'd get that wrong accidentally.
No, I think he did it on purpose. I think he's saying, 5,000, whatever. Yeah. But he doesn't use the same number. Because you're right, of course. Craig famously knew everybody else's lines on the set when they occasionally dried. It was Craig who'd prompt them.
I mean, it's horrible because they're up all night learning them. He's at the ender. He reads it once.
Read it once and knew it all, yeah.
I mean, they're very much...
Oh, apparently Craig said he accidentally got it wrong, gone to James Hickey.
Oh, there you are. You've had this up with him, have you?
Well, he's a fool for admitting that. I would never.
I'd have said I did that on purpose.
Craig was so good at that, and Robert, when he had to have that mask on in later episodes, Robert Llewellyn, had a lot of trouble learning lines with the mask on. It was just a thing. Yeah. So we tried one thing with multi-cameras where Craig was doing his lines and then holding up Robert's lines for him to read while the camera was on Robert, then dropping the script out. He sort of managed to do it for about 3 or 4 speeches before I cut it, and he was still holding the script up.
Oh, Ed, we had that question about from Molly McDade about what is Rimmer's H made of, and did it ever fall off?
Rimmer's H was made of it's actually made of a sort of foam and then sprayed silver and then stuck to his head with makeup glue. Yes, it did fall off quite often in front of the audience, but to his credit, Chris would always go, my H has fallen off, my H has fallen off, and walk out, covering his head so that the illusion wasn't broken.
Here's the scene where Holly explains the whole central premise of the show.
Yeah.
How much of Red Dwarf was debated created in the fine pubs of England? Well, it depends whether you count Wales as England, because it kind of was created in pubs in Wales. So, but it was maintained in many an English pub, definitely.
And celebrated after recording in many English pub and curry house.
Now I thought the toilet was going to be a regular character, but we never brought it out again.
It's a good gag, though.
Yeah, it's a good gag, but it's a bit elaborate.
Build a whole toilet for one gag.
Expensive gag.
You boys, you writers, you know no boundaries, do you? No, we just have a revolving toilet, Paul. That'll be fine. For one joke.
Yeah.
I love the fact this is quite unusual in a sitcom to see somebody dressed quite as badly as that.
And I think we still hadn't, when we first recorded this, we hadn't got Norman in shot, so I think we must have remounted a couple of these things.
Well, we painted him in, Ed, didn't we? Mostly, we shot him on against blacks and dropped him in on CSOs. It was...
Yeah, but there was a lot of interaction there.
Now, this scene I like because talking about the greys and the colours, Rob, you were asked about how grey, and here suddenly we see
visible. Did you see that?
Suddenly a blast of colour when we go back to the old.
As a pro, I spotted it. Yeah, yeah. No, we'd given Paul Montague the designer the directive that we wanted it to look like a submarine. And he took that to mean everything was grey. And everything literally, I mean, they had flower pots with grey flowers in. So I remember shooting this scene, we were desperately racing around, getting chairs from the BBC refectory to try and get some colour into it. But John Pomfrey's lighting really helps.
Now, just looking at these other actors,
Yeah.
He does something I've always wanted to do. He does any second now with Kachansky's friend.
Ed, you're talking about the other actors. It's interesting because you and I, of course, had come off Young Ones, which we'd worked together on. Yeah. And Young Ones actually released a whole. We had no casting directors in those days. We did it ourselves from who we knew. And Rick and Aid and the Manchester gang from Young Ones and also the club comedy circuit had introduced, I would say, 40 or 50 new performers into TV comedy. And here you've got Paul Bradley and Mark Williams, both went on to Paul in EastEnders and, of course, Mark in Fast Show. And they both had small parts in Young Ones. We knew them both from Young Ones. Paul was, in fact, at Manchester with Rick and Aid and Ben a year behind.
I was trying to work out where we ever first found Mark Williams, because I know we worked with him for this, obviously on the Young Ones, but I can't remember before that. So I went on IMDb and I could find nothing. So we just cast him through recommendation of somebody else on the Young Ones.
Yeah, I remember I liked him immediately. He was fantastic. There's a bit that's been cut out of here. Do you remember, Ed, about Peterson's tattoos?
Yeah.
There was some line about we're not doing very well, it's 8 o'clock and we can all still see. And then talking about tattoos he'd got from the night before.
And of course, we see them later on when Rimmer gets his arm. Quick question, I'm sure the fans will all know, but there was one of the more regular, more principal characters in the show who first appeared in a very small cameo in Young Ones. Anyone? Who would that be?
In the Young Ones, he played
in the Young Ones.
Holly.
In a queue in a bank with a wheelbarrow full of change.
Moaning. What was he doing, Ed?
He was in the bank and he had a wheelbarrow full of change, and Rick's character behind him.
Norman Lovett, Chris Toon got there.
He was moaning. Funny enough, his line was a moany line.
Yeah, he was moaning. Yeah, there's a hint.
Can't remember where David Gillespie came from either, but that's.
We thought that we'd do this quite a bit, go back and see flashbacks, because
invisible.
Two people in it and a cat. So we didn't do that last. That's a good callback. Good callback.
We thought we'd have to, didn't we? Because we thought, well, there's no universe. There's 2.5 people here. We're going to have to go back a bit. And then we didn't do it that often at all, did we?
The other question, wasn't the guy who played Paranoia the bartender in the Young Ones?
What? Paranoia? Yes, that was Lee Corns, you mean?
And he was in Bottom, Lee Corns?
Yeah, and he did the warm-up.
Lee Corns, yes, Lee Corns, yes. Of the Wow Show. Wasn't Lee the Wow Show?
I think Danny is superb in this. I mean, he's basically doing a one-man act, isn't he? And he holds the screen, he's funny, looks good, great character.
This is when he's still the full-on James Brown, isn't it, really? I mean, he develops into a more human character. But I love the shiny things. You know all these shiny things? I love that. It must be great when you write those lines, Rob, and then you see an actor just bringing more to it, you know?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Danny was always terrible in rehearsals, and I was always crapping it on the night, but he always came up, always came up.
Yeah, this is very good. When he turns around after this fish conversation, Chris's little dance out was something he did on the night. We never did it in rehearsal.
All these shiny things? I love it.
Look how narrow the corridors are, and poor old Chris has to stay away because he's a hologram.
Yeah, getting close to the hologram there, Danny. There we go.
Did Danny have any input into the suits?
Did he choose them?
Did he choose them, Ed?
Chris.
No, did Danny choose his suits?
I have to agree. I have to say, I'd slightly agree with Rimmer in this.
We're getting nothing from Ed here.
Are you not talking about you're not talking to us about the costumes, Ed?
No, the music.
Did Danny have input into his costume selection?
Yes, yes, he did a bit. I mean, we talked about it, and we felt that anything. I mean, obviously, he's leaning towards James Brown because he used to dress up like that on stage, and so he and I sort of thought that was the way to go, and he did a lot. Those nice rivets.
It was a well riveted set.
Yeah.
Now, this is why we wanted this set, is to have this porridge set up where they could talk like this. You get a kind of nice intimacy without being too close to them.
Because obviously, with a ship that big, they could very easily have had their own suites.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet you put them in a prison cell, really, in a porridge setup, as you say.
Rimmer to rhyme with scum.
It's a good line.
There's a very good line, I think, at the end of this scene. I can't quite remember.
You're looking out for your favourite jokes, guys.
So,
somebody's saying this is only the second time Rimmer ever wore this outfit. I don't remember it changing, but
we kind of made him military.
Yeah, I don't know. Rastabilly Skank. I never knew what Craig was talking about. But he came up with that, yeah. I know we've got some rockabillys out there today, but I don't know what Rastabilly is. And I can only imagine. Classic, great performance. This is very Odd Couples, this scene.
Yeah, it is. And we used to rehearse these shows in Acton, in the rehearsal room, BBC rehearsal rooms in Acton. And we'd have just a pair of sort of metal bunks for them to rehearse on. And we come back after lunch, and there's always be somebody asleep in them.
Me very often, Ed. I was very good at sleeping through lunch. Guys, you mentioned North Acton. So we rehearsed in North Acton, but we shot, of course, in Manchester, which was weird for you, Rob, yeah?
Yeah, it was. It was very weird because we'd started out in Manchester, BBC Manchester, and it was in radio, and Manchester was kind of the old-fashioned bit, and all the exciting new stuff was going on down in London, and we were seen as a bit of, variety, which we kind of were up north. And we finally made it down to London in the big time and did Jasper Carrot and all that stuff. And when we got our own sitcom, we were hauled back to Manchester. It's hard to say it didn't feel like a bit of a failure.
It was strange. We went up in a bus from Acton to Manchester.
To Ed and me, yeah, it felt like a bit of a shock is what it felt like. We used to finish shooting at 10 o'clock, and we were editing at 9 o'clock the next morning. So we got in the back of a car and slept.
I used to edit after the show.
I used to go down to London, Ed, and
my favourite line, sorry, on that day, Satan will skate to work.
I think, yeah. Danny was actually found sleeping in one of the bunks once. I think most of them were. Chris never was, but Craig also was.
Could well have been on set. Danny could well have gone to sleep in the lunch break on the set.
Yeah.
They did live a full life when we were in Manchester. It has to be said. Danny and Craig did live. It was Manchester time. It was Hacienda time, and they led a full life.
Okay, Curtis Threadgold, mate. Is there anything we established in these early episodes in terms of character or world that prevented us from telling the stories we wanted or led to unexpected opportunities? It led to unexpected opportunities, really. I mean, this is one of the kind of trapped episodes.
Oh, a good invisible.
Where you're forced to kind of explore the characters' backstories a bit more, and it fills them out and gives you all kinds of insights into them.
There's the famous tattoos.
There's the famous tattoos. Which member of the cast was worst for timekeeping? I don't.
Say that again.
I think you all know the answer.
Who was worse for timekeeping, Ed?
Oh, right, yeah.
But we had a
Motorbike.
we had a fairly casual attitude to it, as I remember, Ed. We never used to bother too much if people were late.
No, with one exception. You'll have to do that in a separate blog.
No, because I could get reported to the police. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Very dangerous move on my part.
And this Howard's music, reworking the theme all the time. I love him.
So, guys, did we have a music session? Howard wrote incidental music all the way through, and then
Yeah, he practically scored it, didn't he?
he scored it, didn't he? Which again is very unusual in comedy at the time. And I mean, nowadays we tend to use commercial tracks, which are great. I love on Sex Education, for example, the commercial music was brilliant. But here, this is Howard scoring the things as you would do for a feature film.
Yeah.
Now, this fish sequence.
Did he eat the fish? No, he did not eat the fish. It was BBC canteen fish. Nobody would eat that fish.
This fish, though, reminds me that we used to go out to Manchester after the show sometimes, and we went to Chinatown with the cast, and one member of the cast decided, this fish thing reminds me, the entire dim sum, the entire thing.
99 items in Quack Man.
99 items, and he ordered.
You reckon he could eat it, yeah?
His way through it. Guess who that was?
And he didn't quite make it, Ed, I don't think.
No, I don't think he made it past about 47.
Well, we were all sharing, but we got halfway through.
But you're telling me that's gone now, Rob?
Yeah, Chinatown's been destroyed by brilliant council work, organising one-way system so that no one can get there. And the Quack Man had to close. It's horrible.
It was fabulous. Manchester's Chinatown was a great area.
Yeah, it was fabulous.
It is great physical acting from Chris. It really is. I mean, so here they've been acting 3 months and they're required to go the whole gamut of technical skills that you learn in years at drama school.
I think we gave Chris a box for this next bit. He's wearing a box. You'll be happy to know for that.
All in completely different worlds. 3 characters inhabiting 3 totally separate universes, really.
Did the actors mirror their characters in the early days? They kind of did. You know, Craig got pretty slobby and Chris got a bit stiff. I mean, I think it's a bit kind of, that's what good actors do. They kind of get into the part.
And you start to write more for them, knowing who they are.
So these are remote control scutters. They're working off remote control, these ones.
Without radio interference at this point.
We're hoping to God that they'll behave, because it only takes a passing taxi for them to have a freak out.
Were those ice cube trays glued to the drive room console?
This was a pre-recorded scene, not in front of an audience, and then shown to the audience in story order so they can laugh at it. That's a hand-operated one.
What was the budget for Series 1? Do you remember, Paul?
Would have been about 400,000, half hour, I would have thought. 300 maybe.
Wow.
Which was high in those days. The average would have been 250. I would think it was probably about 300.
Oh, there you go, the grey cans. That's what the grey cans is about.
There you are.
2 full days recording. So pre-records on one day, then the audience on the next day. So
well, we'd learned this trick on Young Ones, Ed, hadn't we? The standard half-hour sitcom, you rehearse for 5 days, you shoot on the 6th day, you have a day off. Yeah. 1 studio day, and sometimes you get 2 or 3 weeks pre-filming on something like One Foot in the Grave, or some others do have them. They do 3 or 4 weeks filming beforehand. But the standard turnaround was 1 studio day. And we'd found this little glitch in Young Ones where we were run through the entertainment department, because entertainment shows got 2 days. They got a big pre-record day and then the show day.
Yeah.
And we carried, when we went up to Manchester, we said, well, okay, we can do it up here, but you do understand we have a 2-day stand. So it was very unusual for half-hour comedies to get 2 days in the studio.
But the beauty of that was you could pre-record some sequences, say with scutters or with a fan.
You couldn't have done it otherwise, Ed. You couldn't have done it.
We've never been able to do it otherwise. But then,
actually, just remembering, Rob, the interesting thing at the time, I'm just thinking about those numbers. we never knew what the numbers were. I'm quoting you numbers from the modern day when we actually had budgets and we had to.
Before Bird,
The proper answer to the question is I haven't got the faintest idea what it cost because we were never told.
Never allowed to know. But
We just ordered what we needed and somebody paid for it.
which cast member made the most smeg ups? They were all pretty good off the book, to be honest.
They were.
this is a tricky Scudder scene.
Where did the name Scutters come from? Yeah, that was in the script. We came up with the name and described them to Pete. I mean, there's a lot of skill in between describing what you want. And,
What you said.
And they were perfect, of course, from Pete.
No significance to the name, Rob.
No.
But Lister and Rimmer, of course, are significant names, aren't they, in your life?
Only because, yeah, they were schoolmates. We just we wanted to make it sound like it was a group of people who would be together. I don't know. And so we picked the second names of people from our school. I remember I once, while we were still casting, went through and wrote the crew names of every 169 members of the crew. I don't know why, to make it feel authentic to me. I don't know why I did that.
And that was Chen and Peterson and everybody came from that.
Yeah, Todd and too.
And aren't I right? Didn't one of them, the real person, write to you years later?
Yeah, I never got in touch again with Lister, who was kind of an alpha male at school. He was a pretty good sportsman and all. But Rimmer was an annoying little kid. I'm sorry, he was then. When he became a sixth form, he automatically became a prefect, and he used to punish all the little kids by making them write essays for knocking over his stuff. And so it really was kind of, we named him after Rimmer because of that. It wasn't anything, rude. And years later, I got a letter from our Rimmer, from my old schoolmate, who'd joined the RAF and had flown the royal family out of Kuwait when the Gulf War started. And so he'd actually become Ace Rimmer, which is really...
He had become Ace Rimmer. Yeah. And he was very happy to have had his name given to Rimmer.
Yeah. What a guy, yeah.
A real incredible career, yeah. He did have it.
That's the interesting beer can matching the entire set. In fact, even the cake's grey.
Alexander Slingsby's asking, how do we think the series would have been received had it gone ahead originally and the strike hadn't prevented the remount?
It was only a year different. I don't think anything changed.
Because the difference was me squared, and I think that changed the balance of the whole thing.
Hang on, Ed. What are you saying, Rob?
We wanted to reshoot this scene because if you look, Chris's eye line is, it's all right now, but when he's over on camera left, he's sort of looking away from camera. What I would normally have done is taken the mirror out and stuck a camera through the mirror to catch that eye line. But because of the nature of this scene, it wasn't possible to do it. So I thought we could compromise with a camera on camera right and catch his eye line. But unfortunately, it didn't really work. You'll see it when he moves back.
Ed, can you turn your mic up a bit, the request?
Oh, just stand nearer, for heaven's sake. Were we upset to lose Alexandra Pigg? Well, we were at the time, only because she was great. But we were really lucky to snag Claire Grogan, who was huge at the time. I mean, she'd
been in Gregory's Girl, which is a massive hit.
Massive. She was the nation's sweetheart, and she had hits in with Altered Images.
There you are. That's where the eye line was wrong. Not that shot.
Rob, sorry, I didn't catch what you said. Why do you think it would have been different a year earlier?
Because we wouldn't have had Me Squared, and that changed the balance of the series more to favour the science fiction end of things. And I'm not sure we'd have got a second series, but who knows? Who knows?
No, we got a second series because Peter
reaction
very happy to have a second series.
Oh, Alan Rowland wants to know, what does the red spectrum tell us about Quasars? I think it tells us which direction they're going, actually. I'm not sure. Was Rimmer a prefect? Yes.
No, you're right. We never shot Alexandra. We only rehearsed with her. That's right.
Yeah.
So, but there is a rehearsal picture, is there? I wouldn't know that, but somebody's saying there's a rehearsal picture.
I was very disappointed in that. It's just normally we do it with chroma key and we get him to actually walk through it, but we just didn't have time. So it was a bit of an additive mix. Didn't really work.
It works. Good.
This, however, works frightfully well.
Yeah, I love this scene.
Yeah, the chemistry isn't there between them, is it?
The only time we see Rimmer with any sort of romantic or physical, it's just so un-Rimmer-like, the end of this scene.
Yeah. Why does everyone in the Red Dwarf universe use last names to talk to each other? Because that's the fashion then.
It's a ship. No, I think it's a ship. On a ship, you refer to your mates by the surname, don't you?
Yeah, I guess that's what, because I've always thought that Star Trek was essentially based on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And that's what they did in that, wasn't it, Kowalski? Yeah.
Well, because they're crew members. You don't call them John and Fred, do you? They're crew members.
Oh, Charles Ross says, the red spectrum tells us how fast they're moving away from us. I bow down to his superior.
Is that like the doppelganger on an ambulance when there's that same effect?
The Doppler effect.
Doppler
Light coming up.
What's Lister reading in this scene?
That's your woman's period. Come
Yeah,
on. Cracking line.
Most people's favourite line from the episode.
Just a repulsive idea, Rob. I'm sorry.
This is so un-Rimmer.
Do you know where up the ziggurat lickety split comes from?
No.
It comes from Rick.
Yeah?
Rick Mail used to say, up the ziggurat.
Another cracking.
Not in his routine, in real life.
No, in real life, yeah. I never heard him do it in a routine.
I wouldn't steal it from him.
Here we go. Great line. Yes.
Lovely scene, that. And now he goes on to pass his exam.
I love this Chris. How was the Lister at our school? He was
high-end technology there as the envelope came out.
The bit in the corridor, it is just outside the bunk room, I think. So.
Yes, it is. There you go, guys. Episode 3.
Very good. What a fine Peter Ragg shot at the end here.
Oh, right. So there's a few questions. Yeah. Somebody's asked, and we wanted to talk about it, about Manchester. What was it? Was BBC Manchester prepared for a show on this scale? And the truth is, they really were more used to doing
Question of Sport was their big.
Yeah, quiz shows and news magazine shows, local news magazine shows, and so no, not really. They've done Happy Families, but that was single cam, wasn't it?
We'd done Happy Families before, and part of the deal of going up to Manchester was that we used as many Manchester team as we possibly could. The cameraman on that, Bill, what's his name? Bill?
Go on. What you mean?
On Happy Families, who shot Happy Families. He had come from London, but pretty well everybody else. Bill Dubman, came from Manchester, and in fact were brilliant. But that was all shot, as you say, it was shot in the Peak District of Derbyshire on film camera. But the design and the makeup and the crew and the gaffers and the scene crew and so on, many of them had worked on the same. Donna Di Stefano was the AFM on both of those series. And so they'd kind of had a good crack at it with Happy Families, which was also very complicated. That was Jennifer playing 6 different characters or 5 different characters. So 5 or 6, I can't remember. So that was, you know, had the same sort of complexities. But it was, in a way, a different thing for them. And as we said last week, the audiences were brilliant in Manchester because they just weren't used to being able to come into a studio and see people making a show. And of course, after it became a hit on the first series, then it was fans coming in to see the show. So they were double thrilled to be able to actually watch a recording. But we used to stay in the Midland Hotel in Manchester. And I remember Roy Orbison was touring one night and he was sitting across the bar and we were all sitting having a drink after rehearsal day. And Norman had to go over and get his autograph. We always say, "Oh, come, Norman, you can't. That's so naff. He's done a show. It's late night. He's winding down." And Norman went across and he was absolutely lovely to Norman. Said, "Oh, it's so nice to meet a fan. That's very happy to sign your." You know, in fact, I don't think Norman didn't ask for his autograph. He just said, "I want to shake your hand. You're a genius and you've given me a lot of pleasure." And he was really touched, Roy Orbison.
Great. I mean, going back to the studios, some of the things that they really pulled out the stops there, because we were doing stuff that they'd never really done before, particularly with chroma key work and sort of effects and that we were lining up. And the engineers were sensational in Manchester. They really pulled it off.
They were.
Somebody's asked.
Difficult stuff.
Alex again asked, would it have been better if we'd shot it in London? I don't think so. I think we got we were given our head in Manchester. Nobody bothered us.
They left us alone. The head of department up there was called Peter Ridsdale Scott. Lovely guy. And he was an umbrella for us. If there was any flack or interference, or he just umbrellaed us, and we just got on with it and did it. And I think in London there would have been more oversight, and we were living in a little bubble, weren't we? Really, we were in North Acton for 5 days. We all got on the bus up to Manchester. It was 6-7 weeks all together trying to make it work. And
we watched old Star Treks on the telly on the bus.
We did, and also we watched The Terminator at least 9 times.
And Alien. Somebody asked actually. Let's go over some of these questions from last week. Was Alien a big influence on the set? Yeah. I mean, Alien was a big influence on the whole project. Really, the thing not many people really mention about Red Dwarf is it's a working class space opera. And you know, all Star Trek and everything, it's also middle class. And
I think it's also, Rob, what interests me is it very diverse. Danny was mentioning this in interviews these last few weeks for Promised Land, which of course is coming on Thursday, guys, as I'm sure you all know by now. But Danny was saying it's a very diverse cast, in fact, without any intention to be so. I mean, it wasn't written that way or, intentionally cast that way. We just cast who we thought were the best people to do the job.
Absolutely. I do remember Craig saying, "This is amazing. This is a cast with more black people than white in it, and there's never one mention of it anywhere." And he was always incredibly impressed by that.
Okay. So Alien, big influence, and Dark Star. How much time was it between writing scripts for the first series and for them to be commissioned by the BBC? Well, I think that's well known. We wrote it in '83. We were commissioned in '86 and actually made it in '87.
Molly's asking an interesting question, Rob, about the novels with a holograms protest march, hologram rights march.
Oh yeah. I thought, this is the thing. Writing the novels helped us explore the sort of Red Dwarf universe a lot more, and when you create something like this, there are sort of logical extensions of it. So you're not making it up, and it's all kind of makes sense. You say, of course, people will be protesting about holograms taking living people's jobs.
Except they can't touch anything.
To the panelists, if you were the last, this is from Nathan Moore, if you were the last human being alive and you could only bring one person back as a hologram, who would it be? And it has to be someone you worked with, as it is for Lister. I have no idea. I mean, one person forever. Jesus.
Well, obviously, my wife, who was a makeup designer on the two Runnies.
Oh, that's cheating.
So is that all right, Judy?
It's acceptable.
And Ruby,
yeah,
for you, Ed, obviously.
who appeared in Red Dwarf. Thank you.
I'm really sticking myself there. Let's forget we asked that question. Okay. How would you have dealt with well, like they're doing Dave, I suppose. What is it? And this is an interesting question, I think, for everyone. What is the difference between an executive producer, Paul, and a producer director, Ed? And what did you have to do differently in your roles? And traditionally, I'll let Paul answer this. Traditionally, the producer was the guy or the woman who got this project off the ground and got it made and got it. That was
in old-fashioned BBC terms. If you look at sitcoms before this time, before the early 80s, there was just one credit at the end. It normally said production or producer. Legendary people like Vernon Lawrence and Graham Muir and Duncan Wood and all these people, John Howard Davis. It just said producer, because the BBC was such a massive organisation that all the things a producer has to do nowadays, like assembling the money and assembling the talent and booking all the crew and booking the facilities and so on, they were all done for you. So the standard production office for a sitcom was the producer, a production manager. And when I first worked with Ed, I was the production manager. He was the AFM, the third person. And we worked for people like Stuart Morris and Michael Hurl and people. And a PA, the producer's assistant, a person, what you'd now call the script supervisor, took the timings, printed up the scripts. There were four of you sitting in an office and you did everything between the four of you. But then as things started to get slightly more complicated, the producer role tends to be the person who raises the money, gets the show pitched, gets the commission for the show, handles the relationship with the network. So he's kind of the senior leader and the business figure, while the director and the cast are working in the rehearsal room. The director does the whole camera script, does the edit. But when Ed and I and another guy worked with us for many times on these years, Marcus Mortimer, the three of us, and Jeff Posner was the director as well, we swapped it about a bit. So when I was producing Young Ones and I was directing Young Ones as well, Ed would edit. He was talking last week about the headless sequence in Young Ones. Ed would go into the edit and edit those things together, or when we shot all through Saturday, Ed would go and edit so it was ready to show the audience on Sunday. And then went on to become a director. So on that end credit for us here, Ed was really running this show because I was already off doing other things. So he took the producer director credit and I took the exec producer credit because I just kind of stood in the background trying to make sure nobody got in the way.
In America, the executive producers tend to be the writers. And it's kind of one of those things where the title of producers has become devalued over
Yeah, I think the other thing
used to be the P.T. Barnum, that was the producer. And now American show,
that's right.
The producer is the guy who or the woman who does the accounts and makes sure the book's balanced.
But you see now in American, on movies particularly, I mean, screen after screen after screen, 10, 12 executive producers, very often including the stars because they get an exec producer credit as part of their contract. The cleaning woman's popped in. Does she normally come in on Sunday?
Oh,
cleaning lady's in.
Hi.
Hi, Rue.
Yeah, I haven't worked for 30 years, so if anybody would like to offer me another shot.
You never got any more work after that, Ruby?
No, killed my career.
There you go. Thank you. That's our guest star for today.
Okay. Well, like I say, we'll go over the chat and pick up anything we didn't cover on this one. Next week, it's for Waiting for God. And we have arranged for a very special guest star.
We hope.
We hope. We can't. We don't want to, trail it because
uncertain times, Rob. I mean,
who knows what's going to happen between now and next week.
Yeah.
But
tune in. We hope to be joined by an old friend.
Yeah. And my tip for quarantine survival is get some discipline in your life. It's very easy to slob around, to drink too much, to eat too much. If you have a routine, if you get up the same time every day, if you have your shower and you have your breakfast and have something to do, it just makes the day go better, and your morale's better. And I'm sure there's loads of you out there. I know there are lots who want to be writers, are constantly telling themselves they'll get round to writing that book or that screenplay at some time. Now is the time. Do it. You'll never have an opportunity quite like this.
The truth is, Rob, for you, it's no different. This is how you've lived your life for 30 years, never going out the house, emailing your friends. I mean, that's how you live.
This is it.
I'm going to take a leaf out of Ed's book.
I read a leaf.
I'm sure people have seen this, but it's my favourite meme and joke of the week.
Because of coronavirus, you are going to be quarantined, but you have a choice. Do you A, quarantine with your wife and child, or B?
Very good. And my piece of advice is not about staying sane during this pandemic, but what we do afterwards. And my thing is, just don't eat bats. Okay? Do not eat bats. And I'm not specifically just targeting that at Chinese people, obviously. I'm also applies to Ozzy Osbourne. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll wrap this up with the traditional salute. You all know it. We are in dark times, and we're starting to lose some of our frontline heroes. I particularly want to mention Arima, Nassim, and Amy O'Rourke, two nurses who were taken by the virus, and they left behind 6 children between them. And these people are putting their everything on the line for strangers. And I think the least we can do is show them that this is a daft thing we do, but we mean it sincerely with all our hearts, and we're thinking of you guys. Okay, the full double rimmer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, okay, guys.
Hey, guys.
See you next time.
See you next Sunday.
Be safe.